What's up, fellow coders? Welcome to another exciting adventure in Quick Tech Tutorials. We'll make it quick.
All right, welcome back everybody. And today what I want to go over is a common issue that a lot of new iOS developers run into with the table view. And what that issue is when the developer is expecting a single cell to behave in a certain way and only that particular cell. But what they wind up seeing are a repetition of the cell that they're expecting to only view in a certain way occur once. They see it happen 10, 20, 15, 16 times, however many times it may be. And so what I'd like to do now is just go over and kind of show what the issue is when it presents itself. So you can see here on my table view that I have a single cell, and it's the fifth cell, and its background is blue, and its text is single cell 5. And over here on line 38, you can see that I have, if my index row path equals a given index, and that index is randomly chosen as 5, incidentally on line 5. And what happens here is if my row is the fifth row, I set the background color to blue, and I set the text to single cell and a numeric value. In this case, it's 5. So that's what you see over here. Furthermore, if you look on line 41, you can see that I'm just doing a debug print statement. So you can see that I've called into this conditional one single time. And I've called into it one single time because I had to eventually display the fifth cell. And so it got called one time to display the fifth cell. So it should only happen on the fifth cell. But as I scroll, you can see that that fifth cell seems to be repeating an awful lot in spite of the fact that this is no longer the fifth cell. And as I scroll back up to the top, we will call into it one more time legitimately when we actually have to display the fifth cell again, but it presents itself in the UI in a very different way. So you can see on the second row, all of a sudden my background is blue again and my text is single cell numeric 5. Well, this is clearly not the fifth cell. So if I start scrolling again, now I'm getting this duplication. I scroll back up. Once again, I have to display the fifth cell, but now I have 3 cells that are presenting themselves with the background in blue and the text of single cell 5. I call into it again. I still have 3 cells that are blue. But so once again, I'm looking at this and this is just not what I want. So if we take a look over here at the code, on line 32, we have this DQ reusable cell. So the reusable part is what's happening over here, and that's why you're seeing this, basically this repetition. And it takes this identifier, and you can see that the identifier is just simply a string. So I need to DQ a reusable cell, passing in the string as the identifier, and when I allocate a cell, I give it an actual identifier. So if there's no cell to reuse, I have to allocate one, and I present it, or I allocate it with the identifier that I've set, and that's the same identifier I use to DQ and reuse a cell. So let's go ahead and take a look really quick at what's going on internally in a table view. First, we know that our table view is made up of our TableView cells, and that a table view is just simply a UI view. But within our TableView cells, each one has a reuse identifier that we mentioned earlier. So within our table view is where our UI view cell or UI table view cells are going to go. It has a reuse identifier. And as we look over what a table might look like with 10,000 rows as an example, we'll see that we have n number of TableView cells going in there. Each one has the same exact reuse identifier. And as we begin to get off the view itself, we want to make sure, once again, like we said earlier, we don't have 10,000 views allocated when we can only see, in this case, we can only see 7. So why continue to allocate? Now, what's going to happen is when you first see this, you see that record 1 is associated with the first cell, second cell, so on and so forth. But as the records begin to scroll up, the cell numbers begin to change when we look to see what's happening down at the bottom. This would simulate scrolling up towards the top. So now we have our 9th record, but our ninth record is reusing cell 1. If we go and we continue to scroll upward, we're going to see that those values down at the bottom continue to get lower based off the record getting higher. So again, here our record 9 is looking at cell 1. Here, record 10 is looking at cell 2. So this is the reuse, and you can see now our cell 1 is back up into our viewable state. And just to kind of drive the point home, it's the same concept. Now, while we saw earlier the blue background cells weren't sequential by any means, but this is to show you the general concepts and the same principles that are happening. And here, once again, our ninth record goes to our first cell, our 10th to our second, and now our 11th record is at cell 3. And if we continue down this path, we'll just continue to eventually get back to cell 1 down at the bottom, so on and so forth. So again, this is what's happening with each TableView cell, as well as the reuse identifier that's causing each cell to get reused, which is why you never store the state in the view, but rather in your data structure. So now that we know what's going on within a table view, let's look to see what the solution is actually going to be. And the key here is knowing the MVC model view controller design pattern. And that is essentially separating out your logic from the view. Here on line 7, I have a data structure that I'm just storing in a Boolean, a set of Booleans in. It's just my array. And on line 13, I begin to iterate over that numeric value that I want. In this case, it's 10,000. And if the index is equal to the index that I set up here, 5, I set the Boolean to true. Otherwise, I set it to false. So my logic, my state, everything is within my data structure itself, not within my view. So what I need to do down here is actually set in the code that pays attention to my data model to determine what I want to do with my view. So let's go ahead and get that code in there. Okay, so if we look back here at the code again, on line 38, you can see that I'm basing my conditional off the value that's stored within my data structure at a given index. In this case, if the row is equal to true, I'm not even paying attention to if it's 5 or not anymore. I'm just looking to see whether or not it's true or false. If it's true, I set the background color to blue, and I set the text to single cell, the numeric, in this case 5. Otherwise, I set the background back to white, and I set the text label to a blank text string. This allows me to configure my UI based on the state that I have stored within my data model. So let's go ahead and take a look and see what it looks like now that we have this code in here. Again, we haven't changed anything with the reuse identifier. We're still going to reuse cells, but in this case, we're going to configure the cell appropriately based on the logic that we have within our data structure. Okay, so we've got everything started up, and we've once again just simply printed out a single setting the cell one time. That's here on line 41. And now, as I scroll, you can see I've only called into this one single time, just like I had before, but there's no duplication, there's no repetition. Scroll back up to the top. I've called into the conditional once again to display the 5th cell, but there's only a single cell with a background that's blue. And I begin to scroll, and I get the same effect. So again, remember that cells are reused. So essentially, if I have 10,000 rows in my table view, and I can only see 20 at a time, I'm not going to allocate the necessary room for 9,980. Can't even see them. I'm only going to allocate just enough room so my view, or in this case, my entire window, behaves correctly. So the entire display, the entire window, in this case, the table view takes up the entire view. But here, I just need enough cells to cover from here, from the top to the bottom, and no more. So I can reuse cells over and over, and it's a very efficient memory saver. So anyways, I hope that helps somebody out there. Let me know what you think down in the comments, and what other content you'd like to see, and I'll get that out to you as quickly as possible. Thanks again for stopping by.